Answering Dunmore's call to arms and freedom, thousands of Virginia's enslaved women, children, and men found their way to the safety of the British lines. An enslaved man named Titus Cornelius fled his New Jersey Quaker owner and clawed his way to a British Army camp in Virginia. There he found himself a new life, a new title, and a new name. Titus became Ty, and soon after that became Colonel Ty, commander of the Royal Ethiopian Regiment. This small, mobile military unit struck terror in the hearts of patriots as they carried out stealthy raids throughout the New Jersey colony. Using swamplands as highways, Ty and his men targeted former slave masters, plundered their homes, burned their plantations, and freed enslaved people at every turn. They captured some patriot leaders while assassinating others. Colonel Ty's Royal Ethiopians grew to 800 and never lost a man, all while wearing uniforms embroidered with the words, "Liberty to slaves." By the winter of 1777 and 1778, Washington's army had been battered and demoralized. Disease, defeat, desertion had reduced the Continental Army to a mere 18,000 men. Only then was Washington ready to place guns in the hands of free and enslaved African Americans, allowing them to fight in the Continental Army. Like the British before them, the Americans offered freedom to those who joined. The British refused to be outdone. Months later, in 1779, Britain issued another proclamation, the Phillipsburg Proclamation. It granted freedom to any enslaved person who made it to British lines. And this time, there were no ifs. Whether your master was a patriot or loyalist, whether you agreed to pick up a gun or not, whether you were from Virginia or any other colony, find the British, you find freedom by war's end. To seal the deal, the Redcoats just had to defeat those pesky rebels and their new French allies. After all the quill pens cooled off from the barrage of promises, proclamations, and declarations, 5,000 African Americans joined the Continental Army. And just how many had joined the Redcoats? Over 30,000. No matter the side they chose, American or British, rebel or redcoat, in more cases than a few, the side these brazen, bold, and brave people were on was their own. Who wouldn't want the fruits of freedom offered by the chaos of war? And they were so close, they could just about taste it. By 1783, the war was so unpopular in England, and worse than that, it was expensive. And even if the American patriots were often fleeing the field of battle, what they weren't doing was giving up. So the British did, confident this American experiment in people ruling would fail. I mean, who did these United States think they were anyway? The Iroquois Confederacy? During America's War for Independence, as many as 100,000 enslaved African Americans escaped their owners. George Washington led efforts to recapture all that lost property, with hopes to return them to slavery and get back to business as usual. As British ships readied to leave their now former colonies, New York Harbor was choked with over 10,000 African Americans. The scene was a packed madhouse, as formerly enslaved people were desperate to escape the terrible fate that surely awaited them if they didn't get out of the United States. Parents were desperate enough to part with children, hoping that if nothing else, they could find that life of freedom. Only 3,000 to 5,000 African Americans actually sailed from New York on what is now called Evacuation Day. An even more chaotic scene unfolded in the South. Thousands of African Americans crowded aboard British ships in Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia. Letters written by American Southerners who witnessed the evacuation wrote of African Americans swimming out to catch British ships as they sailed from southern ports. Some climbed the side of the ships. The British took on as many as they could, but were soon unable to take on any more of the African American refugees. Ships filled beyond capacity, British sailors used swords to fend off escaping African Americans, frantically trying to catch a ride to freedom. Countless were turned back into the hands of the Americans. It is not clear how many people were captured. It is clear that some made it. While it is apparent that the loyalties of colonists split during the American Revolution, some remained loyal to the British Crown, while others formed loyal bonds with patriots. For thousands of enslaved African Americans, allegiance was something more than basic loyalty to a nation or to a belief. Their loyalty was to themselves, their families, and to a feeling, the feeling of freedom. The story of Seymour Burr makes it plain. Seymour Burr was an enslaved man owned by the brother of the famous politician and lawyer Aaron Burr. Determined to fight with the British and find freedom that way, Seymour escaped his master. But he was captured and soon returned. Seymour Burr then somehow convinced his master to let him go and fight with the American patriots and earn his freedom that way. And that he did. Who won the War of Independence? Seymour, and thousands of others just like him.